over the period to, you know, we would always check up on them. Are you guys wearing your masks? Are you guys making sure you're sanitizing? So they really did their best. And I think because we had coasted quite well through 2020, we thought, okay, the situation is under control. So after just a short period from Christmas, he went on this assignment with my mother, and in the process, unfortunately, that is when he picked up the virus. And so between the day when he was feeling unwell and got the diagnosis up until the day he passed, it didn't even take 10 days. And I think what shocked us was between the two, my dad was always the strong one. He was very physically fit. He was 78, but he used to be the one to do the drive from Arusha to Nairobi, Nairobi to Meru, back. So he was in very good condition. He did not have chronic illnesses. Little did we know that within a few days from coming back home, my dad would then, his oxygen levels started having problems, and then he had to get admitted. So from the time that he was admitted until he passed on, he never came back home, you know, to our home in Arusha again. So it was very sudden, and it was to someone that we least expected, you know. I think all of us as siblings had thought that, you know, dad will live till 100. Yeah. And he was an excellent father. So that's one thing I would want to stress. He was somebody that we respected, but we also loved very much. He was our hero. And suddenly this person who's your hero, in a matter of days, is gone, and you're there dealing now with COVID protocols. You have to put a burial together. You're going through this intense loss and disbelief that it's happened. So I think that was the first, I would say that's how 2021 kind of kicked off for me, which was very tough. And then after that, several months later, at the end of December, towards the end of 2021, is when, as has happened to very many people, redundancy came calling. The industry that I was working in, of course, was affected, and this was one of the implications, was that there was going to have to be several redundancies, and I happened to be one of them. So it's a job I enjoyed very much. It's a job I cared for. So that was also a huge blow, and it just felt it was tough to go through both of those things at the same time. You lose your father, but you also lose you lose your job. But at the end of the day, you come to realize that losing and loss is a part of life. So how then can you best move forward so that you can, you know, you can still live a good life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, it's very, both of you, I mean, for Ruth and yourself, it was very sudden. And you see, these are people who were very dear to you, and also, again, losing your job. Again, something, like you said, that you really, really loved. So Rehema, again, dealing with this, that is very, very sudden, because again, in some instances where you might actually see, and especially in a case of a terminal illness, you know, some people tend to somewhat be prepared, to go through counseling, be prepared in the eventuality that something happens. But you see, for these two cases, that is Rehema's and Ruth's, you know, cases, it was very, very sudden. So then what happens with the brain, especially once you receive this kind of news, very sudden, no amount of preparation for the same?
Are you asking me the question?
Yes, in terms of how do you deal with it?
Could you speak up a little bit? I can't.
Okay, all right. So how do you deal with the fact that, you know, you're dealing with loss, and it's very, very sudden, that you were not somewhat prepared for, unlike in a case of a terminal illness where, yes, it's difficult to deal with the same, but you're somewhat prepared for the same, but this one is very sudden. So what happens to the brain once you receive that kind of news?
Right, and that's such a paramount question in understanding loss and grief. So we need to understand that loss, even though it's planned, for what you're saying in terms of someone is ill and the family is still prepared, even that becomes sudden. Because there's a level of hope that the individual is going through, and they're hoping perhaps this time my mom or my friend will get better. So what happens in the brain, and it's paramount to understand that loss is actually a trauma. And trauma shakes the certainty and the security of an individual. What that means is when someone passes on, for example, in the case of Rehema, she said that her father was their hero and he was the anchor of their family. When he passes on, there is a void that is left. And the brain is unable to process. And you find that some people who go through loss are unable to process that loss, especially if it's uncertain. So interestingly, to some level, the brain kind of protects itself. And so during the time when the person has passed on, you'll find that people who are grieving or individuals who are going through the process of grief cannot remember minute details. But what they do remember is how they felt. So they will tell you that I was afraid, I felt fear, I felt insecure, I felt like I had lost something that I could not be able to explain. But let's look at the brain. Once loss happens, and remember that's a trauma, the brain recognizes that the body is in a threatening environment. What does that mean? Allow me to be a little bit technical. So the brain, as the Lord made it, is quite fascinating and has different functions. But I want to concentrate on two. So I want to concentrate on something called the limbic system, which is part of three aspects of the brain. So we have the amygdala, hippocampus, and hypothalamus. So the two hippos, the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, are responsible for memory recall and memory retention. But the amygdala is the one that is responsible for, it's a threat, it's responsible for telling the brain, hey, we are in a threat mode.
Danger.
So what happens with the amygdala, it communicates through the entire limbic system. It communicates the body and tells the body, release cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. So release cortisol because we either need to combat this trauma in three ways. We either need to fight, we either need to flight, run away from it, or we need to freeze. So what that happens then when the body is in a heightened state, because if someone is going through loss, it's a trauma. So this entire process affects how they're sleeping. So you'll find that there's inconsistent and up and down sleeping patterns. How they're eating, they could either undereat or overeat. How they're processing in terms of cognitive. Remember, the hypothalamus is responsible for memory. So their cognitive functioning, they're not able to remember things, which is very, very normal during a grieving process. They're not able to retain information. How they're communicating, you'll find that many people who are going through grief reclude. Because they don't know what to say. Even they themselves, they cannot understand what is happening. And that's just a brief overview of how the brain processes the trauma. It's the loss. It's important to note, and perhaps I'm diverting a little bit, but just allow me to say so. And I say this very carefully. We kind of never get over the grief, but we move forward with it. As Rehema has said, you find ways of incorporating memories about that. Do we continue to celebrate his birthday or not? Moving forward has a intonation of saying, let's forget this person ever existed. Let's now get the new normal. It's also very important to know that after loss and during the grieving process, somewhat life may never be the same again because you'll never see this person, or possibly with complicated grief, you'll never get closure. So what does that mean then? How do we incorporate our new normal around the loss? So I share that so that we know when someone has gone through loss. Sometimes it's just good to be quiet and to just listen. Sometimes we offer words of things will be okay, it is well, it is better. Not really.
and again, it's something that we always say because sometimes we don't know what to say. So some people find it easier to just say, you know what, it's going to be okay. It is well, God knows why. But we forget that this person is going through something. And like you said, the best thing that you can do is sometimes just listen. You don't really have to say anything. But then again, to that question, what you said as far as moving forward, how then do you know that this person is moving forward versus someone who is completely in denial?
Right. So what we check is the parameters. If a loved one has passed on, for example, like 2 weeks later, it's very normal for them to have sporadic eating patterns. It's very normal for them to not be okay. But if it's possibly like a year later, There's a disorder in the DSM that talks about that, and I don't want to get very technical, but we just check the duration in terms of when the loss happened versus how is the person coping. And it's important to note that there is no manual for grieving. Because we are different. How I grieve is different
Very
from how you
different.
grieve, because we are very different. And hence that should give an individual the freedom to grieve in a healthy way. What do I mean by that? If it's possible, avoid emotional numbing patterns or behaviors, like drinking, maybe going out a lot, things that take you away from processing the grief.
Okay.
So once again, we check during the duration when the loss, either complicated, happened, and how the person is trying to, again, incorporate the loss within now their normal life. Yeah.
Okay, then, because there's some people who say, listen, but at the end of the day, I need something that will help me to deal with this, right? So some people would say drinking somewhat helps because it helps me to forget, and then I will deal with the situation later. But of course, we'll also get to understand more about, so fine, once, for instance, you go drinking, or like you said earlier on, maybe go out a lot, just try to do this other thing so that you get your mind off of it. Does that also have an impact on the same? But let's come back to Ruth. Again, Rehema has talked about so many things in terms of the symptoms, how the body reacts to the news. First of all, that listen, there's something that has happened, especially the brain. That's something that has happened, and you need to probably do something. That is as far as the brain is concerned. So for you, so at what point did you receive the news that your son is no more?
Okay, like I said before, this was the end of the second day, and like there were all indications, a lot of anxiety, because we were looking for him all over, and then I think I got into very deep denial, and I think the people who are dealing with us also noticed this, because there were 6 colleagues, and each colleague now, and each group, each family, and the person who was dealing with them. So there's somebody who was really standing with us, and they're updating us of what's happening. So this person also realized the great denial I was in. I may not know about other family members. Maybe they were in the same state. So they didn't even tell us that day. When on our way home, they didn't tell us. They told my brother, and this is the one who told my husband. When now we had already arrived home, this was Wednesday, and remember we had been gathered together somewhere for some talks. And these talks, remember, they were like past tense. They were in past tense of each of the colleagues. This is what he was doing. This is what he was like. This is how we loved him. And to me, I didn't click that something was wrong. And then when we were departing, this was Wednesday now, we were told to meet the following day at Chiromo. This was now for viewing the body and confirming. And still it didn't click to me. What happens at Chiromo mortuary? So when we were back home is when now my husband, there were so many people in the home, is when now he literally broke the news.
Yeah.
And I remember I did nothing. What I was doing, I continued doing, because he gathered us together, and I remember I was cleaning the table somewhere. I continued, and it didn't click.
Yeah. It's like, no, you did not just say that.
I didn't hear.
Yes.
I didn't hear. So I continued, and what I can say, Winnie, is that in such situations, there's some very special grace that God gives you to come through this. And from what Rehema is saying, I think there's something in the brain also I'm coming to learn today. So it's like there are some things I did around that day and the following day and throughout that week. Sometimes I wonder, was I the one who really did this?
What did you do?
some things. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Now the following day was Thursday. We went to Chiromo to view the body. This is the first day now I'm viewing the body of my son. And this is the day now for sure he's not there. So what would you expect for a mother to view the body of the son?
Yeah.
And we went with the wife, with my husband and with my daughter, the four of us, and we viewed. And can you imagine what happened? I got some temporary, okay, I've seen, it's true, he's not there. But do you know, I got some temporary happiness seeing, wow, his shirt is well tucked, his belt is on, and oh, he's composed, he's organized. I mean, it's like he went, but he went, the going was not so difficult. And that temporary happiness helped me in that room at that particular time for some few minutes. Until later on, I was like, oh, what did I just view? So I think there's something happens in the brain, but God gives you grace enough. Because we went and all of us went out of that room. My daughter also was like, is it real? And he had some questions there immediately. And he was told, now that one we shall get to know when you do the post-mortem. Later on, the wife, my daughter-in-law, also felt like, he could be there still, because there's something. He looked at the mouth and, is he really dead? You know, something. There's some confusion that happens, and that's God's grace. Because under normal circumstances, you can even faint, and that's the end of it. Anything can happen. So that is how I got the news, and that is how I received
You
them.
were able to deal with it and your reaction to the same. And again, Nyambura, I'd want you to respond to the same in terms of temporary happiness, which again, for so many people, they'll be like, wait, what? But you just lost someone. What do you mean some level of temporary happiness once, again, Ruth was able to see her son and see how he was, his shirts, his belt. She says she felt some level of temporary happiness. But before you respond to the same, let's speak to Rehema in terms of, so Rehema, your dad, again, someone who's very dear to you and someone that you really respected, and he's gone. So, and based on what Nyambura was talking in terms of how sometimes we react and how we behave when we receive such news, was it different for you or was it more or less the same?
In my case, I definitely went through the shock because the news was broken to me by my sister, who found out kind of erroneously, like the news had traveled a little bit in as much as it was such a short time. And you know, these days with technology, all it takes is a line to a WhatsApp group and someone else then reaches out to you. So my sister found out erroneously by someone reaching out to her on WhatsApp before she had the chance to be formally, what can I say, for her husband to tell her the news. So she's the one who told me. This is a sister that's based here in Nairobi with me. And so she told me the news, and I remember just thinking to myself, but no, we were talking, you know, we had been in discussions about, you know, should we maybe have him airlifted to Nairobi? We had started the process, checking in with the flying doctors, all of that. And I think for me, the first thing that hit me was, what did I tell him yesterday? You know, did I tell him that I loved him? Remembering his voice. And one thing he always used to do, because the first time they told us that he had COVID, both of them had COVID, I was so shaken. And so I think him trying to shield me, he would always start his conversation with, you know, hi Remy, I'm fine. You know, I'm doing fine. He would always try and talk about how well he's feeling that day. And I think what had given us hope was that he had shown such a large improvement in the last 2 days. And then suddenly, the night before he passed is when he really went downhill from there. My mother and my sister were in Tanzania at the time with him. But I think for me, it was the shock, and it was trying to piece together, did I say the right things to him before he left? You know, did he know how much I care for him and I love him? You know, was he sure? That I really fixated on that over the first few days, I would say, until I had the opportunity to view his body in the mortuary once we traveled down. But I think my key thing was, did he really know how much I cared? I hope he did. I hope I didn't treat our last conversation so casually, because I had no idea it was going to be the last.
That's true.
And so out of that, I think one of the things that became very clear to me, or that I've tried to do, is really not take people for granted, especially close loved ones. Have that, I hate to say treat it as if it's the last time you'll see them, but just I've tried to live with that value going forward, because I think it really stayed with me. I kept thinking, did I tell him the right things? Was our last conversation a conversation that gave him, happiness and peace?
Yeah.
It was a nice conversation, but I just felt like maybe I should have said something more. Maybe I should have done something more. So that was the immediate reaction that I felt once the news
Okay.
was broken to me, and it started sinking in that he's gone.
Yeah. All right. And Rahim, again, basing on these two different reactions, because is there a specific way that people should deal, and probably you mentioned this earlier on, because majority of the times, once we receive bad news and such intense news, of course, the first thing that people usually expect you to do is to cry. But there's some people who might not actually cry even during the entire period. They might never ever shed a tear, right? And Ruth actually mentioning the fact that she felt temporary happiness for a second, and then when you listen to Rehema, she's like, I started asking myself questions in terms of, did I do this? Did I do that? Did he know how much I loved him? So when it comes to dealing with the same and reacting to the same, right? Is there a specific way that maybe we should, or everybody has their own way of reacting to such news?
No, everyone has their own way of reacting to it. It's a very personal reaction, because it's a very personal relationship with the loss. How I relate, for example, to you is different from how someone else relates to you. We cannot react the same way. And that's why it's so important to show empathy when, even though you don't understand the loss that someone has gone through, it's important to show empathy. And just to answer your question on the temporary happiness, let's take a journey through what she was going through. So you can imagine you possibly saw your son 2 days ago, and he was healthy and everything was going well. And then you get a call that, you're in a meeting and then you're told your son is no more. What's going on in their heart is, as she said, first there's denial, there's shock, because remember, it's a trauma. There's a security that has been taken out. It's like a rug that has been pulled under your under your feet. And what happens then is such a deep longing in their heart. And as Rehema is sharing, did I do this? Did I do that? So all these things are going through your mind cognitively. And then you have this one brief moment to see him. And your heart is happy. So it does make sense for her to have experienced that temporary happiness. And it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. So in what way would you say that it's not normal as far as then dealing with the news, right? Because like I said earlier on, there's some people who would decide to go, unhealthy ways of coping. But before even coping, just receiving the news, is there like a not normal way of reacting to the same?
No. Because again, there's no manual for this.
Yes.
We haven't been told 1 + 1 is equals to 2, or 1 - 1 is therefore equals to 0. So however people react, it's okay. Allow them to.
Okay.
And and this is what as a therapist, I insist on. If you don't know what to say, be honest and say, I do not understand what you're going through. I cannot start to imagine the depth and the pain and the hurt and the loss that you're going through. But I want you to know one thing, I'm here. For as long as the Lord wills me to be here, I am here. I'm here to listen.
Okay.
And that's possibly just 50% of what many people who are going through grief would really want to hear. So in terms of a normal way on reacting to the loss, there isn't.
Okay. And I'm asking this because a lot of the times, like I said earlier on, people expect you to react in a certain way. And if you don't, they're like, but you, maybe they did not love this person, or maybe they did not love their job, or maybe, you know, so I like that. Allow people to, you know, to react the way they do, because it's a very personalized way. But then again, so when does grief begin? Because some people might be like, fine, so I lost someone, I'm trying to somewhat get into acceptance that this person, for instance, is no more, or my job is no more. So then at what point does grief or the grieving process begin?
At the inception of when someone has received the news.
Okay.
Immediately, because remember, grief is the process of an individual coming to terms with what they've lost. So you cannot delay. I cannot be told today that, for example, opportunity I was waiting for is not coming in, and then I delay the response. Immediately, I receive the news that what I was hoping for is no more. That at that inception, that's when my grief process begins. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Ruth, for you, got to see your son. There's a way that you reacted and all those things. But like you said, 5 months after his wedding, he passed on. So of course, it's very like early. You're like, wait, but you just, you know, had your wedding just recently. So at what point then did you get to acceptance and now moving forward? How was it for you?
Let me say there's no clear line of how I can say I started moving forward. Grief, especially when you grieve your loved one, is a process that has no end. It's only that with time it gets better. That's one thing I may say. With time it gets better. So for mine, actually, this is one question I kept asking God. Why did it have to be such a roller coaster? You know, 2018 was the happiest year for us as a family. You see what comes with a wedding, all those events and all those ceremonies and the paying of dowry, and now the wedding, and now this lady is in our family, and what followed was Christmas. And then it was a very good 1 week together as a family with a new person in the family. And then immediately after that, it happened.
Yeah.
So coming to your question, how I coped with it. First of all, this is not the first loss I experienced, Winnie. I had lost my mother-in-law, was over 100 years. I had lost my sister, younger sister, older sister, and lost a very close friend, and lost my brother-in-law. So what I realized is that there's no time you are prepared for death.
Yeah.
Death is hidden, that's one. And it's so personal. How I grieved is not how my husband grieved, is not how the siblings grieved. It's personal for each
For each
of
and
the
every
people.
one of the people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And today is different from the next day.
Yeah.
So every time you wake up with a different mood altogether, especially when it is just fresh.
Yeah.
And if this continues for years and years.
Yes.
When I lost my son, there's something I remembered that I had never taken into account. That my mother had lost a son long before we were born. My mother had lost a son who was 1 year old, and how she talks about the son, whom some of us never saw. That was in 1956. How she talks about the loss of the son up to today. Sometimes we make fun of it.
Okay.
Because she would even walk the way this and saying he was the most healthy baby.
Yeah.
And now she would sometimes try to imitate
The
how
way the baby
this
was behaving.
So when I lost my son,
Yeah.
I wondered, will it be like this
The
for
same
the
way
rest?
that your mom,
And
yes,
it
grieved.
seems it will be.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
time heals.
Time heals,
But
yeah.
you can't forget
You
your
cannot.
loved one.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can't. All right, so let's take a break, very quick break. But of course, when we come back, we'd also want to understand, is it okay to postpone grief? Is it okay to postpone grief? Because we've seen a lot of people who do that. So keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubeme_Winnie. Remember, the focus is on loss and grief, and we're asking you, have you ever lost something or someone, and how did you cope? We're taking a break. When we come back, we'll be looking at your feedback, so stay with us.
6. Did you say 6? Fungua app. Ding dong, double. Your favorite moment.
Now your favorite ice cream.
Ding dong, double.
It's so good.
Order what you want. Tutaleta what you want. Ding dong, double.
Order it now. Download the app, order a Glovo, and we get it.
Ding dong, double.
At the first sign of pain, you need a solution that you can trust. Try Panadol Advance. With Panadol's Optizode formula, the tablet absorbs quickly and starts providing fast and effective pain relief you can trust. Try Panadol Advance.
He's a corporal in the British Army, the chair of an association of Kenyan veteran and serving members of Her Majesty's Forces, and a part-time DJ with his own entertainment company.
My desire has always been to join the military. Na hii kitu ilitoka from since I was in primary school.
Yes, this Saturday, Corporal Kisila Mawia gears up to share his experience on the front lines.
Nimeenda Canada, nimeenda France, Afghanistan, nimekuwa Germany itself.
Only on NTV.
Akili, 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 akili. Will you wash your hands with me? I want to wash my hands with you. Come on, I will show you what to do. Wash your hands in clean water. Wash your hands, wet them with the water. Wash your hands, now add some soap. Scrub your hands in the soap and water. Scrub above and below between the fingers too. Scrub under your nails and scrub-a-dub-a-doo. Rinse your hands in water. Rinse them clean, rinse away the soap. Dry your hands and go.
Akili, why do we wash our hands?
To wash away the germs.
Akili, what are germs?
They're like tiny little bugs on your hands and they can make you sick.
But I don't see any germs on my hand.
That's because they're so tiny that you can't even see them.
Oh wow! I want to wash the germs away. Will you wash your hands with me, Akili?
Of course!
International Women's Day is a global holiday celebrated annually on March 8th to commemorate the cultural, political, and socio-economic achievements of women. It is also a focal point in the women's rights movement, bringing attention to issues such as gender equality, reproductive rights, violence, and abuse against women. And this year, the International Women's Day 2022 campaign theme is Break the Bias. Imagine a gender-equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge women's equality. Collectively, we can all break the bias. Individually, we're all responsible for our own thoughts and actions all day, every day. We can break the bias in our communities. We can break the bias in our workplaces. We can break the bias in our schools, colleges, and universities. Together, we can break the bias on and beyond. Join Nation Media Group as we engage on breaking the bias on the 8th March 2022.
Join Property Focus every week as we walk you through some of the latest house designs, property, hot deals on land for sale, modern furniture, trendy kitchens, finishes, and also get to hear experts' opinions on matters architecture, building construction, and real estate. Now, catch the show with me, Peter Ngigi, every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. only on NTV. Let's go.
Ili tuendeleze maisha bora kwa ajili ya wapendao, nchi yetu na usoni wetu, kwa ajili yetu sisi sote. Pata chanjo, kaa chonjo, kuhakikisha nchi yetu na uchumi wetu umestawi katika uwazi. Tusirudi nyuma.
right, welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. The show is Your World, and today our focus is on loss and grief. A very, very important conversation, if you ask me, as far as loss and grief, because again, there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding loss and grief. What is considered loss, what is not, and the grieving process. Again, what do you do? How do you cope with the same? And of course, the question that we're asking you today is, have you lost something or someone? And how did you cope? Once again, have you lost something or someone? And how did you cope? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. Let's get to hear what you have to say. Aaron Cheriot said, I lost my mother. She could be the one to understand my struggles in the streets. Now, which shoulder can I, or whose shoulder can I lean on? A painful wound in my heart. I'm so sorry, Aaron. And then Professor Harrison Pro says, I lost my mom, my grandma, cousin, then dad. But here I am, acceptance, that's it. Then adjust, and with God's help. And then Mary Kalungu says, you move on and pray for God's strength, all right? And then someone else says, this is Elizabeth Nzoki, says, it is very painful feeling, but everything will live to God, okay? And then let's get to hear what someone else says as far as the question. Anthony Walela says, time heals. All right, so keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. If you have a question that you need to pass on to our panel, feel free as well to do so. The numbers to call are down on your screen. If you want to speak to our psychologist or Ruth as well as Rehema as well, feel free to do so. And we give you that provision. You can call in and they're here to answer all your questions. But Rehema, can we also get to hear your part as far as dealing with the loss of your dad? Again, it was very, very painful for you and the entire family, but also later on you also lost your job, something that you really, really loved to do, right? So in terms of dealing with the same, again, that is first of all coping with the fact that your dad is no more, and then to also losing your job. Can you just take us through that process?
Sure, thank you, Winnie. I would start by saying that you experience one type of loss, and in this case it was the loss of a loved one, my father, and you have other things to quote unquote occupy your mind, and your work is very obviously one of them. So staying busy, you feel at least helps you, I don't want to say move on, but at least it helps you continue with life. And a lot of times for us in this day and age, questions around identity come up because I feel as if our jobs become a big part of our identity, especially if it's work that we enjoy, if it's a brand that we're proud to work with. And so when that gets stripped away, it really leaves you with a lot of questions. And I think for me, it was just coming off the cusp of losing my father, and then, many months later, this happens. You really feel stripped down to the bone. And I think I questioned, just asked God, okay, so what next? And what more, how much more do you think I can take? But you realize, I don't want to minimize anybody's level of grief, but you do realize that there are people who've been through really tough situations. It doesn't make your situation any less important, but at least it gives you some perspective that, as the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun. So I may not be the first, I will not be the last, but I would say the key thing that came out was, what is your identity then? We spend many hours at work or working, and when that is taken away, I think the core of it for me became, so who are you? And apart from who are you, what are the things that you like to do? And perhaps what are the things that you have been you've neglected, or maybe neglected is a strong word. What are some of the things that have needed your attention, but you've not been able to give as much attention because you're always working or very busy? And for me, I would summarize it by saying it all came back down to family. I'm a solo parent. I have a son who's 11 years old. And then I also have my siblings and my mother. But my mother especially, she's been our pillar through this. I think we've all been each other's pillar. But really the silver lining, I would say, in all of this was going back to basics, having a major reset, which I feel I needed, and a recharge as I figure out, with God's help and God's grace, what direction next. I have my own ideas, and I have a pretty good idea, but it was just a chance to breathe. And one thing I will say, when it's the issue of redundancy, by God's grace, you do have a level of breathing space, because a lot of times, you know, under law, there is a package that you will be offered. So again, the silver lining was just, I can have a moment to breathe as I move on to the next chapter or the next journey. But it's tough. It's tough, but I'm really grateful, because it has made me stop and really question, who am I and what am I working towards in the next decade, 2 decades? Which is something, when we were so busy all the time, we don't get, or we are not able to be as intentional about thinking on these things and putting your affairs in order as well. One thing I would say is, one thing that became evidently clear to me is that I did not have a will. When I sat down with a financial professional just to, you know, map out what the future should look like, things like that. And I would never have taken or been as intentional about putting those affairs in order had I not had this time. And then the second thing is, because my parents had a will, it was very, very clear what positive impact that has to the loved ones who are going through this grief, to not have to have the additional quote-unquote headache or heartache of now this person has gone and they've gone without leaving their affairs in order.
Yes. And you know, when you talk about will and getting your affairs in order, in our culture, I would say, cultures in Kenyans, we don't talk about wills, because that is like we're inviting death into the family. So we really don't talk about that. But I hear you on how it is important to just put your affairs in order. So before losing your job, and I know, like we said, grieving, it's a process. It doesn't just get to a point where you're like, fine, I'm good with this. No, it is an everyday journey. But had you dealt with or accepted the fact that, you know what, that is normal? Had you gotten to that point of acceptance and being at peace with that before losing your job?
I will say that's a tricky one, because in a lot of ways, sometimes I still feel like I'm accepting it, and we're coming onto a year. It's exactly a year this month. But in terms of at least accepting that it had happened, yes, I had come to terms with it's happened, but now what does this way forward look like without him? That's something that I was and still am figuring out. But we've, there's some really, what can I say, again, the silver lining things that have come out of it. I feel that it's united us even so much more as a family. We talk so much more than we used to. We were not bad, you have the usual family WhatsApp group, etc. But these days we have intentional calls, and we're spread out all over, the 5 siblings and my mom and myself. But we make it a point that every week we connect on Google Meet or Zoom to have a family call, and that has helped us because we have divided it into because we meet every week, so there'll be calls that are dedicated just to catching up. How are you? What's going on with you? Then there's also calls that deal with business, because when somebody passes on, whether we like it or not, there are administrative things that need to happen. Life has changed, so what does that also mean for my mother? So that has really helped in just giving us some sort of rhythm, and it's brought us closer. But definitely, I would say it's a journey that sometimes you feel, okay, I've got this, and then other days you feel, do I really? But all in the trajectory of knowing that the graph is moving on.
Yes. I totally hear you. So Rehema, in terms of then that aspect of moving forward, because there's some people who might actually feel guilty that they're moving forward and their loved one is not there with them to somewhat maybe continue living with them, enjoying life with them. So you somewhat feel guilty and stop yourself from just moving forward, quote unquote, because this person is not here anymore. So is that normal? Is that not? Is that like a normal way of dealing with the loss?
Right, so let me just backtrack a little bit. And I'm sure many have heard the 5 stages of grief: denial, acceptance, bargaining.
Yes.
in recent research, it has found that yes, the stages are there, but they are not in a linear incline. You don't go from denial, then you close, then you go to acceptance,
and
then you
close
close,
that
and
chapter.
then, no.
Okay.
It's a very up and down, sporadic, as Rehema is saying. It's a very personal journey. Why do I share this? It gives the individual a freedom to express denial today, acceptance tomorrow, bargaining the other day, come back to denial, go back to acceptance. So it's important we note that, yes, the stages are there, but they are no longer in a linear curve as what we used to perceive. Now, it's very interesting, or it's very maybe tricky to use the word normal in grief, because if you're using normal, then you must have a scale.
True.
You must have a scale of saying 0 is abnormal, 7 is normal, 14 is too normal.
Okay. Okay.
And that's why I think what I keep echoing is that loss, because loss is very personal, then grief is also very personal. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's allow the person to just deal with
Just allow them to
the
be.
way, the best way they know how. Okay. And then Ruth, for you again, like you said, the loss of your son, it was not the only loss that's you experienced prior to that. Lost a number of people, and again in a span of, let's say, 15 years, you've also lost like different people. Can you take us through that way? And then in terms of dealing with the same, was it the same? I mean, dealing with the fact that you've lost this different people with, let's say, different levels of relationships and attachments. So grieving process, was it the same or was it different? But let's just understand, first of all, who did you lose at what point, and then we'll talk about the grieving process.
Okay, thank you very much again, Winnie. So I said I lost my younger sister, then an older sister. I also lost my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. I also lost my best friend. I lost my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law and others. Before now losing my son. So it is all different, and it is no time that you are prepared for death. And grief is very unique from one person to the other, from one person that you are grieving to the other. You don't grieve the same. There are many circumstances which lead you to how to grieve, how you received the news, how the person was, the relationship between you and your person, the person, and many other things. It is never the same.
But the one for your son, you're telling me this during the break, is one that really shook you. Because
it's
again,
the one
this is your
that
child.
It really shocked many people actually, not only me, even my immediate members of my family. It was one of the things that was very difficult. At one time I asked, there are some things I was sure I'll never do. Like I couldn't believe one day I'll get to bed and sleep, because I was not sleeping for a long time, over like 2 weeks. I never slept. Like I was wondering, will I ever take like 2 minutes or 3 minutes without thinking about him? The other thing was, will I ever stop crying? Will I stop crying? Will I be the same again? But look at me, here I am. Winnie, don't I have a smile?
You do.
God's grace.
You do.
God's
you really
grace.
Do. You really do.
So time heals. And as Rehema has said, different people will come to your home giving you instructions on how to heal. And it doesn't work. Like when my son went, they had just brought us, with the wife, they had just brought us the album of the wedding photos. And it was somewhere within reach. And this is one thing I thought some visitors will even want to look at. And this is now how I see people are different. Some people will look at them and go through them, and that will make me happy to see how a wonderful time we had sometimes back. Some people will tell me, no, keep it away. Please keep it away. And many other things. Some people will tell you this, others will tell you this. In my home, we have one family portrait, And actually, we are taking it some few months before. And some people will come and look at it, and some people who had never even known him would say, oh, this is wonderful. Some people will come and whisper to me, please remove that photo.
Okay.
And this is wrong because I was enjoying looking at it.
Yes.
So, as you said, people should know what to say.
Yeah.
There are many people who came and said things that helped us. So it's only God who can help you. When you are helping people who are grieving, now I know what I can tell people, what I cannot tell people, the advice that I can give people. Like I almost got sick out of dehydration. Somebody, let alone a counselor, is the one who asked me, are you taking plenty of water? And I wondered how, why is it, why now? And I came to understand that there are so many things that happen in your body that can cause dehydration. Those are some of the basic things you should go and tell people. Please try it, try take plenty of water and all that kind of things. Men of God would come and say verses that I never heard. So we cannot really say when you go visiting people and grieving, you keep quiet. What if everybody came and kept quiet? It won't work. There are many ways of helping the people who are grieving. Like I remember there are some people who came and they were permanently in my kitchen. There was food, there was for anybody coming and for the family, there was tea, there was everything. And I think for more than a week I never stepped in my kitchen. That is a way of helping people. So it's not so much necessary that you come and try to give verses that you think will help or tell people it is well. Sometimes somebody tells you it is well and you actually feel like it is well. There's somebody else, a friend of mine came and told me, Ruth, it shall be well. And at that moment, it didn't click. And I told her, no, it's well with you, but not with me. Me, I've lost my son. It's not well. But let alone somebody saying the same thing had a good impact. Yeah.
So then, Nyambura, okay. This is difficult because you see, people would, and again, the intention is good, right? To come and be with you and grieve with you and just be there for you. But then again, I hear what Ruth is saying, that not everything works. So know when to say what. So then, again, Nyambura, can you just help us through with this? And especially for someone who wants to go and be, let's say, with a family or friend or anyone who is grieving, right? Again, how do you behave? What do you say? And at what point do you know that you should not say this at this point? This is what you say at this point. It's a very difficult time for both of these people.
Right. What I have found is because grief and grief is very personal. We want to do something or say something in a bid to help the individual going through loss and grief to stop feeling that pain. We desire to make the pain lighter and the heart less. And I say this very, very carefully and respectfully. That's not our role.
Okay.
That is God's role. Because it's only God who can truly understand how deep and how impactful this loss the person is going through.
Yes.
Why do I say this? It then gives us less pressure to come and empathize with the person. So what do you do at what particular point? Again, it's not a black and white. There's a lot of gray area there. But what I have found useful is being authentically honest. I don't know what you're going through. I cannot start to comprehend, but I am deeply sorry.
Okay.
As far, the best I can do at this point is to pray for you, and I am committing to doing that. Even hearing those words already gives a sense of care, and it gives a sense of genuineness. I'm just not trying to say words to make you feel better, because I cannot make you feel better. I'm here to tell you, I empathize. I do not understand. I empathize, but I'm going to walk with you this journey.
Okay, all right.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, but what about those people who choose to stay away? Because again, they're scared. They're like, what if I go and say something that will not sit well with a person who's grieving? So yes, I deeply care for them, but let me just stay away for a while, and then maybe I can go be with them. Is that okay? Is that not?
I guess it depends with the individual.
Okay.
I could be staying away because, and I know this might sound a little bit insensitive, but I could be staying away because your loss is a trigger to me.
True.
And if I come and I see you crying and I start crying, then who's going to comfort who? So it depends with the individual.
Okay.
At some later date, as to what she has said, meet up with a person, initiate a conversation and say, I'm sorry I stayed away, but this is the reason why I stayed away. But even whilst I was away, I prayed for you, I lamented for you, this is how I did 1, 2, 3 for you. That way the individual is felt cared for,
Yes.
even within a prime of distance.
All right. I hear you. All right. And then Nyambura, for you again, not Nyambura, Rehema. Both of you are Rehemas.
Yeah, both of us.
So Rehema, for you, in terms of then, during this whole process with your dad, like you said, again, you cannot say that you got to that point where you fully accepted. It's been like a roller coaster for you. But then again, so how did life change for you? Again, I think maybe you have answered this in terms of put everything in order, perspective, as far as regarding people, with love and care, because again, we never know when this will strike. But after the loss of your job, because like I said earlier on, some people don't really consider this as major loss. We just like, see, it's life. See, once you have, sometime you have a job, sometime you do not have a job, life moves on, right? But for you, did you go through those phases of you're really angry at your employer because, listen, I gave my all in this company and then you just let me go. So did you go through, that whole process of you're angry, there's bitterness, there's this, and just dealing with the fact that, hey, I lost something that I really, really treasured?
So yes, I would say, like you said, most times we associate loss and grief with losing a loved one, and that's the acceptable form of that you can easily talk about. Yet you do go through similar feelings with the loss of a job. So it's not the first time. Many, many years ago, it happened, and at that point, I was 6 months pregnant. Solo parent, and just unsure of what next. And what really helped me through this time was the fact that it happened before, albeit it was, 12 years ago. And if God came through then, there's nothing that's going to stop him from coming through again. But definitely it stings because the same reasons you're talking about. But, we've been working from home, and, there's evidence to show that even when you're working from home, you end up working more, longer, extending yourself. So it feels as if there's a lot that's been put in, and you don't see the requisite recognition or rewards. But one thing I want to clarify is that whenever you sign a contract to do anything, if it's in the way of employment or even if it's going into business, you know that there's a level of risk. And especially with the pandemic coming, it's not something that came so out of the blue. I would say my father's death was out of the blue, but this, you understand that these are tough economic times, and in this particular case, it's easier to be objective. In as much as you may go through the feelings of grief once the loss becomes a reality, you know that there's a chance that this could happen, and if so, I think in this particular case, it's important to then say, so what next if this actually comes to pass? And that is what helped for me, just starting to realize as well that passion for your job is excellent, but must it wrap up and be your full identity at the same time? So for me, that was the question of, in future, definitely not wrapping yourself so completely and totally. I think there is a way to be a dedicated employee if employment is the route that you're on, versus also not losing those boundaries of who you are as a person. So if this was to all disappear, and that would be my challenge to everybody, in whatever you're doing, whether it's a job that you're crushing it at or your business, it's good to care, it's good to work hard, it's good to, yield the results. But if tomorrow, for whatever reason, God forbid, you find out that it's all been stripped away, what is left? That is my key point. What is left? And with what is left, it's your loved ones, especially, who are going to be the ones there to experience it all. So it's yourself plus God, but it's also your loved ones. And what they're getting in exchange, is that a version of yourself that also gives you pride in knowing that when this is all taken away, I am a version of myself that's still a blessing and good to my loved ones?
Yes.
Or do I want to take it the other way and just remain bitter and upset? And it's okay, those emotions are okay, but the issue is, let's not live there forever.
Yes.
So that, for me, was the biggest takeaway. Yes, it stings. Yes, it's a form of loss. Yes, you go through the grief.
Yes.
But it's different because at the end of the day, family is forever.
True.
And while employment for the long term is great, no one owes you anything, I think that's the blunt reality. Nobody owes you forever after just because you signed the contract. Anything can happen that implicates that. So that's how I would divide the two.
You're able to
It's
deal with
painful,
the
but
pain.
it's one you can move on quite easily. But the other one of a loved one, that stays with you forever.
take
Because I
years.
believe family is forever.
Yeah, you never forget. You never
And-
forget.
and
All right.
If it's okay with you, I just want to add something.
All right, for like a sec, but we need to go on a break,
I mean-
or could you just do that after the
Oh,
break?
sorry.
All right, okay. Hey, Rehab, let me just because both of you are Rehabas. Okay, so let's take a break. But of course, when we come back, I would also want to understand. So then, how do you take care of yourself even as you grieve, right? How do you do that? And that question of is it okay to postpone grief? We'll also be answering that. Plus, also looking at your feedback as far as the question that we're asking you, and that is on have you ever lost something or someone, and how did you cope? So stay with us. We're coming back after the short break.
Funga huo mdomo wako. Haya ya kuhusu yanamhusu. Kila zuri lina kafara yake.
Ukiona wanaume wanaongea unatakiwa ukae kimya.
Shopping guide. Set a budget. Don't shop when you're tired, hungry, lonely, bored, or upset. Glovo. You order, we deliver in minutes.
Get unlimited free deliveries for food, groceries, and Glovo party orders. Subscribe to Glovo Prime for only 300 shillings per month. Terms and conditions apply.
It's the headquarters of good vibes. So I should just kneel and begin to call on Jesus because I'm a bishop.
You know, Dr. Kingori, yes, you sound like a street fighter. Where did you grab it? Unataka noma.
Kingori, let me tell you something. Mimi mtu angenipata saa hiyo nikiwa first year, angeangukia bibi mzuri.
You know, they always say smart women, where to catch them is with love.
Kingori, I love how your suit looks. I love you in a suit. I love you in a t-shirt.
As in any example, ama you actually mean that?
Maifungua akili ya msee ama kichwa ya msee ukapata vile watu husema huyu jamaa ana akili.
Tunaweza toa nyama kwa huko nyuma tuweke kwa
Kifua. Yesi mtu anakuwa na roho chafu sana. Na ukidive inahesabiwa?
Si ndio, ukiwin, udive win, si umewin.
Hiyo ndio tizi unafaa upige. Napiganga tu tizi ya 90 meters ya kwanza, alafu nikifika 90 meters na fly. Every Friday on NTV 7:30 p.m.
In your paper this week,
Kenya concerned over Somali's nullified oil bid. Kenya accuses Somali of giving out exploration contracts for resources in disputed areas. Could Rwanda rebels be in Uganda? Just read Muhoozi's tweet, plus our opinion leaders. Forget science and common sense. Ugandans only trust God. Joachim Buembo. Hear me good. This time, the revolution will be tweeted. Elsie Eakuze. For this and more stories, get your copy of the East African.
I'm really proud of what I've achieved and the me I've become.
Angela Okutoi of Kenya, like the Serena Williams of the US.
How? Because the level is tremendously high. She practices with the Davis Cup players who are actually men and not even boys.
I would like to congratulate Angie once again for bringing glory to the name of Kenya, which is world known as being an athletic country.
If I have made it, you can also make it.
Ili tuendeleze maisha bora kwa ajili ya uwapendao, nchi yetu na usoni wetu, kwa ajili yetu sisi sote. Pata chanjo, kaa chonjo, kuhakikisha nchi yetu na uchumi wetu umestawi katika uwazi. Tusirudi nyuma.
All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. The show is Your World, just in case you're tuning in right now. And today our focus is on loss and grief. And we had asked you, that is, what have you lost? Have you lost something or someone? And how did you cope? And let me just read what some of you had to say as far as that is concerned. Someone says, I'm a woman, we just cope. And this is Agi Mukai says, I'm a woman, we just cope. And I'd want Nyambura to react to the same because most people actually feel the same. It's like, we're women, we're strong. We cope, we move, okay? And is that okay? And then someone else says, just allow me to get it. Yes, so someone's, this is Zitgist Commuter says, I remember when I lost my mind, there was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo in so much space. And when you're out there without care, yeah, I was out of touch, but it wasn't because I did not know enough. I just knew too much. All right, okay. And then someone else says, this is at Hello Biobi says, the biggest loss is losing your parents. But then I learned to be strong and push hard for a great future without looking back. And then someone else says, this is Betty Rono, says people often take the grief of mothers who have lost babies, that is miscarriage or stillbirth, for granted. I think this also needs to be addressed. In my experience, this is the worst grief. Thank you very much for that. And then someone else says, just getting through your tweets. But Rehema, in the meantime, Nyambura, in the meantime, can you just address that fact where someone says, we're women, we go, we move? Is that okay?
It depends with what they are defining coping as.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What does coping mean? It's good to deal. There's a saying that we have as therapists. We say all emotions want to do is to be recognized. If you try and push away an emotion, specifically within loss and grief, which is what earlier you were discussing in terms of pushing away the grieving process, it kind of builds up. At some point, you find that it just takes a small spark and you erupt. So does coping mean pushing it away? Does coping mean I'm not going to deal with this? Does coping mean allowing it to overwhelm you? Dealing is the best. And how do you deal? If you feel like crying, cry your heart out. That's the reason why God created tear ducts, so that we can cry. It's okay to cry. I remember, or rather I recall, your guest in studio asking, will I ever stop crying? The one thing that I have found that most of us do when you're grieving is we kind of want to hurry the process. We want to be okay immediately. But that's not healthy. If today I'm crying 50 times, it's okay. Today I will cry 50 times. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. But if I process today, I know the processing for tomorrow is less and the processing for the next day is less. So now, if you're going through grief, now is the best time to start processing. How does that look like? Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. Is it hurt? Is it pain? There's an exercise we do, it's called emotion regulation, where we name our feelings, we situate what we are feeling, we objectify what we are feeling, and then we just allow ourselves to feel the feeling. It takes between 0 to 5 seconds. And immediately you're like, oh, I was feeling hurt. Yes, I'm still feeling hurt and I'm still feeling pain, but it's of less intensity.
Okay.
If that is what your audience is asking as coping, then that's a healthy way of coping, and that's dealing.
All right. Okay. And then what about those people who postpone grief, you know? They're like, yeah, I'm not ready to deal with this, so, you know? So, first of all, how do you know that you're postponing grief? And is that okay? Does that help in terms of dealing with the fact that, you know what, you experienced loss?
Right. How do you know that you're postponing grief? When you know you're intentionally pushing what you're feeling aside.
Okay.
So if I'm feeling pain and hurt, intentional pushing it aside would be numbing the pain. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to feel. I'm going to allow myself to cry. That's you postponing the grief. Because remember, it's trauma. There's a cognitive response, which is we need to either fight, flight, or freeze, but there's a bodily response, and trauma is stored in our body. And it's your body's way of telling you, things are not okay, we are not okay, we are not in an emotional equilibrium. The body is telling you, hey, process this, cry, shout, scream if you need to. So if you find yourself saying, I don't want to deal with this right now, perhaps the question is why? Are there functional things that you need to do? But it's important to remember that delayed grief is doubled grief. Because as you delay your grief, you're still going on with life, right? Someone will hit your car, knock you, abuse you, anything. You're still piling on a lot of pain and a hurt to underlying pain and hurt. And that's too much a burden for a human soul to carry. So process it. As you process today, it becomes lighter. Remember, we never get over. We move on with it. It's research and science has found that average time for an individual who's going through grief, either ambiguous or complicated, and the normal grief is 2 years. And it's not 2 years back to normalcy. It's 2 years to integrate the loss and the grief and the new person that you have become. You see, and that's what I was saying before we went on break. Sometimes, and I say this carefully and very sensitively, sometimes there's a beauty that comes from all the pain that we've gone through. Like Rehema has learned that having lost a job, I was integrated my identity with it. Through that grief, she's learned what is the most important aspect in her life, and she's working towards that. So that's a good thing. So in a sense, even though there's pain and hurt, the grief does make us better people. It makes us more empathetic, it makes us more sympathetic, and then we can be able to share love and compassion to people who are going through things that we, in our wildest imagination, would never ever be able to understand.
Okay. And then, so Rehema, fine, going through all the emotions, and like we said when we started the show, it is absolutely okay to feel whatever we feel. Sometimes you feel you accepted, the other time you're like, absolutely not, still go back to dealing with the same. So then the question is taking care of yourself while you're grieving. And you know, for so many people, it might be a very difficult phase because maybe you're feeling guilty. Maybe you're just like, no, let me just hold this first and deal with, you know, the fact that this person is not here anymore. So for you, how were you able to just take care of yourself in as much as, yes, you were still grieving?
I would say, for me, I had the privilege and blessing of family. I know I've harped on that theme so much, but it is true. We have lost one member of the family, but we still were remaining, 6 of us. And staying in touch with each other, checking in with each other, and that's where I feel technology is such a blessing. With WhatsApp, to call somebody who's, let's say, in the US or in the UK or in Tanzania or right here in Nairobi, is very possible. All it takes is get out your phone, quick message or quick call or voice notes. That really kept me going. Number 2 was the fact that we then also were very intentional about setting up a meeting every week so that we can check in with each other as a collective group and just see how we're doing. And those calls and the times we're able to see each other physically, sometimes they were messy. There wasn't always, roses and sunshine, but at least you felt that you belonged. You had your people with you, you had your team with you, and you were part of that team. My heart really goes out, and I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like for those who maybe have nobody else. And that, I guess, Nyambura would be able to speak to in terms of what do you do? But I would say definitely family was key. Secondly, I know it may sound very cliche, but where is God in all this? And God, you have some very real conversations with him, let me tell you, in all of this process. But you see that he can handle your mess, whatever mess that might be, and you can be completely vulnerable with him. And so for me, I would say definitely just talking it out with God, letting him know where I'm at, having family as a support, and most important, not most importantly, but very important for me is I made the decision to seek therapy. So walked the journey with a therapist. I feel that I need to reignite that again. He was great to speak to and very, I would say very critical in helping me just manage this part of the journey. And then for those who are church-going or perhaps other religious bases also do provide the same services, see what your church may have. My church has a program that's, I believe, 12 weeks, and I've just signed up for it. You do it as a group. So I think it's very dependent on like we've talked about before, the person, the situation. But for me, that is what helped.
Okay.
Family, faith, and talking it out with a professional. Yes.
Okay. All right. And for you, Ruth, as well, I think when we were talking yesterday, you said, you know what, it was a very difficult process for me and my entire family, but you also saw the beauty of the same, right? So for you, in terms of taking care of yourself, and how were you able to cope with the fact that my son is not here anymore, and then moving forward, how did life change for you?
Let me say, first of all, family unity in the family is very important.
Yeah.
Because we were together, we grieved together, and it helped us a lot. And we made a deliberate decision to love our daughter-in-law, so she was part of it. I'm calling it a deliberate decision because you know what happens in a culture these days. And you have fights and you have cases in court and all that. So together we loved her so much, and we grieved together. We had family meetings to clearly say, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about the loss? How are you missing him? And how do you feel about the terrorists? And have we forgiven them? And counting the many blessings that God has we have in the family, and then looking at the positive things, remembering the good moments. It really helps a lot, and it was very good. Something else that happened to us is that we got a lot of support from neighbors, from church. From friends, from his colleagues where he's working, that organization was always with us like this until days after, even 1 year after they came to check on us. And that really helps. I can't imagine how people grieve, people who have no support, social support. So that is one thing that also helped. And something else that I did personally and never thought helps is that I journaled. I started lighting things, lighting my feelings, lighting my experiences.
Emotions and everything else
everything.
Yeah.
So that really helped me. It really helped me, and maybe I'll talk about it later. It gave fruits to a book.
You wrote a
the
book.
journal became a book, which is Hope Beyond Grief. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And that is basically your experience, how you were able to deal with your emotions and all those things. Everything is in the book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything is in the book and many more. Yeah, because I learned many things. Actually, Winnie, I felt like I had been broken down into small separate pieces and then put down together in one new creature. Because some of the things I do now, even preaching, even in church, I had never thought I can do.
Oh, wow.
Being called an author is something that I never planned. I never thought I could, and I've done so many things, but that one had never been. So what I think is that whatever you lose, whether it's a job, or as Lehema is saying, or position, or a loved one, I think God it's not like when I lost my son, I later came to realize it was not about me. This God taking my son, it was about him and him. My son, come home now. Your time is up. It was not about a mother. You, mom, I'm taking your son. No. So when I came to think about that, and when I think of how my son would want to see me, he loved me. He would want to see me happy.
Happy, yeah.
In fact, let me tell you, one day, let me call it a dream for convenience, but I was not asleep. I saw my son talk to me and ask me, Mom, for how long? Let me call it a dream, but I was not asleep. And then a first came into my mind that the ashes are taken away to keep them from evil. That one really helped me. And I decided to relax and take things positively. Because there's a positive side of every situation.
Absolutely.
When you lose a
Doesn't
job,
matter how bad it is,
when you, who knows, maybe it's an opportunity for you to get a better one. So, like this time around, many students and people are going to do their exams. You may not really get the mark that you want to get. You quote unquote think you are failed, but that mark that you are calling a fail, and some students go even into depression and locking themselves in in houses. That's the mark the Lord wants to work with. So accept it. Go and work with that particular one.
Mark, yes.
So when my son went, I thought now there are three things. He's gone. That is something I have to deal with. The pleasant, I have to deal with the good things allowed him and the life we had together. And then the future.
Yes.
What next now?
Yeah.
There are other people looking upon me. The siblings are there. I have to be. It's not going to be strong for anybody, but I have to be at least whole.
Yeah.
I have to dwell on the
I
present.
like that. You have to be whole.
I must be whole.
Yeah.
What?
I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
But Nyambura, for those people who say, no, but I need to be strong for the family, right? So they don't really either show their emotions, how they are at, where they are at. They're like, you know what, I need to be strong for this family, right? What impact does that need to be strong for the family have on them as far as grieving, and just coming to terms with the fact that, you know what, I lost something or someone?
Right. It's important to understand that if someone says that I need to be strong for my family, it is indeed a need. Perhaps they are the firstborn, or they're the ones who have the functional authority to steer the family forward during a loss and a grief. So it's important to understand that they are doing this out of functionality.
Okay.
The impact it has on them, unfortunately, I perceive that it denies them an opportunity to truly feel and grieve that loss. The long-term effects could be certain things we call psychosomatic disorders, where you find an individual has developed possibly high blood pressure, or maybe diabetes, or just other psychological disorders that are emanating through the body. And that's in a very, very, I would say, extended way. So if you're finding that you're in the role, the lead role in terms of functionality after the loss of either it be complicated or uncomplicated grief, it's important to take at least 5 or so minutes, and you can do it in solitude, in a hidden place, maybe in your bathroom, or even in the dead of the night, and just really sit down with your emotions to synthesize and process what has really happened. And this is the beauty. When you process and you internalize and you allow yourself to cry or shout or scream, that space is where your strength comes on, because there is much strength in vulnerability. You're able to stand up and say, guys, I know I had said that I need to be strong for you. I need help. I need you to pick this up. I need you to pick that up. And that's healing.
Yeah. And let's just talk about seeking help, right? At what point then do you seek help? I know for Rehema, she said, listen, I had to actually seek help and get that from a therapist, and that also helped her in her journey, you know, towards healing, because like we said, it's not something that you forget and move on. No, you actually move forward with the same. So at what point do you seek help, and who do you go to?
Right. So I normally look at, or rather approach it two-pronged. One, before you seek help, you must come into realization that I need assistance. And it's 50% of you to say, I need help. So that's good. 2, why do you go to? Where do you go to? It depends with what kind of help you're wanting. If you're looking at better understanding within a rational aspect of why am I feeling this way? How do I need to do? How do I need to go to? Please go to therapy and ensure that your therapist is a qualified therapist. If you're not in the capacity to see a professional therapist, all these other institutions, your church, your school, an NGO, a community, they do have counselors there who can be able to process grief. However, and I must insist on this, please do a background check on your therapist, because you could go see a therapist who would impact more pain and loss and more hurt to you. So for example, if you're going through ambiguous loss, as Rehema has said, you've lost a job and it's deeply, deeply disturbing you and it's hurting you. And then you go and see a counselor and they tell you, but why are you so sad?
You're
why
not
are you
the
so
first
hurt?
one to lose a job.
Right? And an opportunity will come up.
Yes.
You see, that kind of disqualifies the pain and the hurt, but that causes more pain and hurt.
Okay.
So it's very, very important for you to ensure that these therapists that I'm dealing with, are they qualified? What is their background? And now with, as she said, digital, you can do all the searches that you need. A little secret. If you want to know you're dealing with a qualified therapist, I always say, ask for their credentials. If you find that they're defensive and saying, how can you, what, don't you trust me, run for the hills. Because I should be able to tell you, hey, you're dealing with a therapist. You're here, you're in a safe space, which is what therapy offers. It offers an individual a safe space to scream, shout, do everything they're doing without being judged, but to be directed in the right way.
Okay.
The thing that has worked for me personally, apart from therapy, because I am a born-again Christian, Lamentations. I open Lamentations and I just cry to God, because I'm currently going through, sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm currently going through a loss, an ambiguous loss right now. So I find that lamentation and just crying and screaming and doing all these things, it really helps to ease up my pain and my loss. The other thing on self-care, pick one thing inexpensive that you can do for yourself every single day. Is that waking up at 6 and sleeping at 9? Is that eating a healthy meal once a day? Is it swimming? Is it walking the dog? Is it running? Is it calling a friend? Just one thing that uplifts your mood for you to achieve an equilibrium, even as you're going through loss and grief.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. All right. 4 minutes to go. Okay. So Rehema, in terms of someone who probably is going through grief right now and thinking, hi, so how do I deal with this? Will I ever heal, from this? What would you say?
I would say, very respectfully, yes. How that looks like is ultimately up to us how we chart it forward. Because as we've said so many times during this show, it's a very personal process. There's something Ruth said which I really resonated with when she said Hassan asked her, for how long, how long are you going to be this way? And it's not to put a time limit on somebody, but for a loved one that you are grieving for. And this is, I understand we can still grieve people that were loved ones, but we didn't have good relationships with. But if it was someone that you had a good relationship with, imagining that how would they want you to deal with their not being here anymore, I would say can give some perspective as a start. So very much with my own dad, him looking down on us all, I know that he would not want us to, be in such a prolonged state of grief for him, in the sad state. Let me put it that way. So I would say definitely think about the perspective if it was a loved one you had a good relationship with, and then who is your tribe? Who is your family? Who is your support? And when I say family, it also means your wider circle of friends, because sometimes family complications can be there. So who is your tribe? Who are your people that are with you, and really leveraging on that. That's what I would say, and asking for the help when you need it.
Yes.
It's critical.
Yes, sometimes it's very difficult for people to just ask for help, but get there. All right, and Ruth, for example, maybe a mother who's watching us right now and thinking, I have lost my child. I think earlier on we were discussing about an aspect of what if this person left and we were not in good terms. So, the person who's left is still living with guilt and all those things, right? So what would you say in terms of, the person, very, very briefly?
Okay, thank you. For a mother watching and maybe grieving your loved one, your child,
All
whatever
right.
age, know that time comes and things get better.
Right.
Time heals. And it's always going to look at the positive side of every situation.
Okay.
Can
allow
I
me to
say
yes? Because allow me to catch, because we need to also go on another live event. But all right, very, very briefly, like 30 seconds.
Yeah, what I was about to say is that, for example, a friend came and this was actually after the funeral, and I told her, I thank God, it would have been worse. And this person thought, I am sick, I need a psychiatrist. And I meant it. I meant it because she was wondering what is worse than death. And what I meant is that I first of all, I did the best for my son. That is one. Number two, I meant that it is possible even to, I lost my son, it's possible even to lose 2 members of the family. It happened in that same place, and many other things, Lema. So if you look at the positive side of every aspect, you will be better.
Okay, I like that, short and precise. All right, and on that note, we have to end the show. Thank you very much, Ruth Wanyikian, author. That is Hope Beyond Grief. Thank you very much, Nyambura Gadhumbe, who's a lead psychotherapist at Renewed Minds Consultancy, and as well as Rehema Kahurananga, who is a storyteller and communications specialist. Thank you very much, ladies, for coming by today, sharing experiences, but also Nyambura just helping us put things into perspective as far as grief and loss, loss and grief is concerned. So my name is Wendy Lubemba. Wishing you a lovely day ahead. We'll see you tomorrow for another topic that is as far as your world is concerned. But for now, God bless and have yourselves a lovely day ahead.
Thank you.